Well, welcome everyone. I apologize for the Zoom glitches tonight, and our moderator is having some issues, and she'll be joining us a bit later. But I want to welcome everyone to the workshop this evening. I'm Patrick Byers. I'm a horticulture field specialist with the University of Missouri Extension, and our topic for this evening is pick your own farming. And we'll be talking about all aspects of pick your own with an emphasis on the actual marketing aspect of pick your own. So I'm excited that you're here with us tonight. We're a fairly small group. As we go through the material, if you'd like to put any questions you have in the Q&A, that would be great. And I will stop periodically. And at that point, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you might have using your microphones. So I think without any further ado, let's go ahead and begin the presentation. Okay, very good. It looks like we are now getting underway. So thankfully, it looks like the technology is cooperating with us tonight. Again, I'm Patrick Byers. I'm a horticulture field specialist with the University of Missouri Extension, and I'm actually based in Webster County, just east of Springfield, Greene County. And I'm excited to be with you here tonight. A little bit about my background. I've been with University of Missouri Extension for 14 years now. Prior to that, I worked for 18 years at the Missouri State Fruit Experiment Station, which is a part of Missouri State University. And all through this, 30 plus years of career, I've had the opportunity to work with specialty crop farmers and fruit and vegetable farmers, cut flower farmers, farmers growing nursery crops, just a diversity of different types of farmers. And a high point of my time in service to farmers has been working with pick your own farmers. And I've spent lots of time on pick your own farms. And what we'll be talking about tonight is actually a compilation of the information that these farmers have shared with me over the years. As I said before, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those into the Q&A, and we'll be following through on those. And as I said before, also, I'll be stopping periodically and we can tackle questions orally. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to acknowledge that tonight's workshop is a collaboration with Springfield Community Gardens. Springfield Community Gardens is a community-based nonprofit organization in the Springfield, Greene County area. They have a mission of a community where everyone has access to healthy local food. And their work is in several areas. They have a network of over 15 community gardens across Greene County. They also oversee a very innovative farmer incubator program. And the most recent adventure has been working with Cox Hospitals to develop a hospital farm. All of these projects are described on their website, on their YouTube channel, and on their Facebook site. So please check out Springfield Community Gardens. The third collaborator in our workshop tonight is the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture has a number of programs in place to help support specialty crop farmers. And these are specialty crop farmers of all scale, from very small scale farmers to large scale farmers. So I encourage everyone to reach out to the Farm Services Agency. This is the entry point to the services available through USDA. There is typically a Farm Services Agency office in every county in Missouri. And housed at that office will be the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which has some innovative cost share programs in place to help farmers, the Risk Management Agency, and also other USDA program agencies. All of these agencies, their missions, their programs are described on the farmers.gov resources website. So check that out as well. Well, tonight we're going to talk about pick your own farming. And I divided the material into several categories. We'll first have a quick overview of what pick your own is all about and why farmers might consider marketing crops through pick your own. We'll then talk about how to choose a pick your own crop. There are some crops that are particularly well suited for pick your own and others that are not as suitable for pick your own marketing. And then we'll talk about pick your own planning. We'll take a look at the thought process that a farmer will go through in deciding whether or not, first of all, pick your own is for them, and then how they would set up a farm so that it would be an effective pick your own marketing situation. And then we'll talk about actual pick your own operations, how they work on farms. And then we'll finish up with some thoughts on pick your own and produce food safety. As I said before, please type any questions you might have into the Q&A. Okay, the first thing we're going to take a look at is pick your own for you? And some things to think about. First of all, let's define what pick your own is. And basically a pick your own farm is an interactive relationship between farmers and customers, where the farmer allows people to visit the farm and then to choose, cut, or pick their own product out of the field. Now, there are some farms that are pick your own farms of a single crop. There are some farms that have more than one crop that they include in their pick your own offerings. Oftentimes, a farm will have other marketing channels available in addition to pick your own. For example, there may be pre-picked product available on the farm, or the farmer may also market through a CSA, farmers market, or perhaps some other marketing outlet. And then one thing that's exciting in these days is the overall development of agritourism. Again, providing opportunities for people to experience the farm. And pick your own can be one component of a comprehensive agritourism plan. Now, why choose pick your own? Well, let's think about it from the consumer's perspective. Why would people want to go to a farm and pick their own products, quite frankly, when they could purchase those products pre-picked, or perhaps even go to a grocery store or farmer's market? Well, here are some of the reasons that consumers give when they have been surveyed. First of all, pick your own offers a greater sense of connection with the food supply. People understand where their food comes from in a very intimate way in a pick your own setting. Secondly, people value the farm experience. And as I mentioned before, agritourism is capitalizing on this, but people value that rural experience. And when we consider that most people in the United States are 2 to 3 generations removed from the farm, there's this interest, this, in some cases, longing to go back and have a farm experience. And certainly pick your own offers a farm experience. And then there's also the perception that self-harvested crops are affordable and they're also of high quality. When we think about the distance between a typical crop and the market in the conventional situation at a grocery store, it can be thousands of miles and days of time. But in a pick your own setting, the customer is connected directly with the harvest of the crop. Now, why would a farmer consider pick your own? Well, pick your own can be a helpful way to reduce product harvest and handling labor. Quite frankly, you're substituting the pick your own customer for a person that you would have to hire to harvest and handle the crop. There can be lower equipment costs. In some cases, the equipment needed for harvest can be substituted by the hands of pick your own customers. So this can be helpful. There may be the possibility of larger transactions per customer. Some customers come to a pick your own farm with the idea of harvesting a quantity of product and then using that quantity of product back home to make a value-added product like a jelly, a juice, a jam, wine, something like that. Now, there are some disadvantages from the farmer's viewpoint. For a pick your own to work, really location is very important. We'll talk about that here in depth. Secondly, pick your own can be vulnerable to weather. I've heard strawberry growers say that if they have 3 consecutive weekends during the harvest season where it's wet, rainy, cold, windy, it can seriously impact the income potential from a strawberry planting because pick your own customers just won't come out if the weather is inclement. There is an ongoing need for advertising and promotion, particularly as pick your own farms age and become a more established way of marketing for a particular farm. There is still the need to replace pick your own customers annually, and this is done through advertising and promotion. Liability issues. Certainly when you invite people onto the farm, you are exposing yourself to some interesting and unique liability issues. And then of course, there's the need for customer supervision. The need for labor to surrounding harvest and handling is not completely removed through pick your own. There's still the need to have labor in place to supervise customers. We'll talk more about that here in a moment as well. Now, it's important to have a bit of a self-examination when thinking about pick your own marketing. And here are some criteria that I have noted over the years that spell success for farmers who are interested in pick your own. So if you can honestly answer yes to these questions, then pick your own may be a good fit for you. First of all, do you like people? Do you like a diversity of people? Do you like some of the stresses that come with interactions with people? If you can answer yes, then pick your own may be for you. Are you willing to put customer needs and wants first? Perhaps first in front of some of the other things that need to happen on your farm? And if the answer there is yes, then pick your own may be for you. Are you willing to welcome people to your farm? Pick your own inevitably leads to some loss of privacy, and this has to be accepted also by farmers who are interested in pick your own. Are you a good communicator? You need to be able to communicate with people, to share with them your farm policies, to share with them ideas about crop management and crop harvest, to answer the questions that they will inevitably have. So if you're a good communicator, pick your own may be good for you. Are you willing to accept damage to your crops? There'll be lots of hands touching your plants. And these hands, in many cases, are not trained hands. These hands, and in most cases, it's accidental, but they can damage bushes, trees, and crops. And then finally, can you accept the increased risk? Obviously, there are ways to protect against risk, but you have to be willing to accept the fact that there will be increased risk if you invite people to your farm. So if you can honestly answer yes to these 6 questions, then pick your own may be a good fit for you. Okay, at this point, let's take a quick break. Does anyone have any questions about whether or not pick your own is right for you? And again, feel free to unmute and let me know what your question might be. Any questions at all? Okay, well, let's go ahead and continue on then and talk about choosing a pick your own crop. So there are lots of crops that are suited for pick your own, and I've broken them into some categories here to talk about. And we'll start with tree fruits, and these include apples, peaches, cherries, pears. These are all crops that do have potential for pick your own, and the opportunities are seasonal to some degree. Those summer tree fruits like cherries and peaches can be a good complement to fall tree fruits like apples and pears. When thinking about tree fruits and pick your own, you definitely want to think about the interaction of the customer with the tree. And if we look at this upper picture here, we can see a group of customers gathered around a tart cherry tree. This cherry tree has been kept deliberately small by pruning so that the majority of the crop is easily reached from the ground. The last thing you want is people climbing in trees. First of all, of course, this can lead to damage to the trees, but it can also lead to damage to the customer if people were to fall. Again, the idea of management of risk. If you're interested in using apples, pears for pick your own, then it's best that they be grafted to dwarf or semi-dwarf rootstocks. You also want to avoid the use of ladders. It may be tempting on the farmer's part to provide ladders for pick your own customers, but that is not a good risk scenario. So try to figure out ways that you can harvest tree fruits from the ground. High density works great with high density orchards such as apple and peach orchards. These orchards are grown on dwarf trees. They're very small trees. Most of the crop is very easily harvested from the ground. The crop is also concentrated, so it doesn't take long for the consumer to harvest a sizable amount of product in a high density orchard. Inevitably, there's going to be damage. Again, just the action of clutching a fruit and pulling it off of the tree can lead to tree and spur damage. So farmers should expect some damage to their trees from the standpoint of a pick your own harvest. So again, these are some considerations relative to tree fruits. Brambles, blackberries, raspberries, and gooseberries are well suited for pick your own. And again, we have seasonality in play here too. The high point for many of the brambles is in the early to midsummer period, but we now have primocane type brambles, both raspberries and blackberries, that can extend this harvest into the fall. Thornless cultivars are always best. Again, you want to provide a pleasant picking experience, and even people who are experienced in picking thorny berries will prefer to harvest a crop from thornless cultivars. Divided canopy systems where you separate the part of the plant that is producing the fruit from the vegetative part of the plant work very well. By doing so, you can concentrate the berries in one part of the canopy where they're easily harvested by the customers. Now, brambleberries are fragile and they must be handled with care. And this is particularly the case with raspberries. So it's very important, first of all, to provide appropriate harvest containers, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and to properly train people in how to harvest brambles, how to handle them carefully, and how to handle them in such a way that when they're back home with their harvest, the berries will be in good condition. Also very important to share with pick your own customers the importance of quick refrigeration with brambles after harvest. So once you get them home, they need to go into the refrigerator. Blueberries are a dream come true for pick your own, very well suited for pick your own. The plants are of a height that is easy to manage. You can position the fruit in a zone where it's very accessible to most customers. There's no thorns to deal with on blueberries. The berries themselves are easy to manage once they are brought home. There's nothing to peel, there's nothing to pit, there's nothing to pull off. They're ready to go. And on top of all of that, the berries are somewhat durable, more durable, for example, than brambles. And they can be handled in a easier fashion from the standpoint of bulk harvest, which we'll see here in a moment as well. So blueberries are well suited for pick your own. Strawberries are also well suited for pick your own. Now, strawberries by their growth nature are low growing plants, and this can be a challenge for people who have disabilities, particularly disabilities related to crouching or kneeling. And it can be helpful to consider raised beds where the bearing part of the plant is raised up above the surrounding row middles, and to provide mulched row middles so that it's easy to walk in and amongst the rows of berries. And keep in mind that with strawberries, you may be kneeling or squatting. And so it's important to provide a work surface that is clean. And straw works very well. Other mulches work well also in the row middles between the strawberry beds. Cut flowers, a lot of excitement about cut flowers as a pick your own crop. Now, not all cut flowers are well suited for pick your own. There are some very valuable and expensive cut flowers that would generally not be considered for pick your own because of the possibility of loss. So flowers such as ranunculus or peonies typically would not be good cut flowers for pick your own. On the other hand, cut flowers like zinnias, like sunflowers, as we see here in this picture, are excellent choices for pick your own cut flowers. Now, cut flowers may be marketed by the stem, so much per stem, by the bunch with a standard number of stems per bunch, or customers can do a pick your own bouquet. These are all popular options for pick your own cut flowers. A number of vegetables lend themselves to pick your own. Right at the top are green beans and sweet corn. Green beans harvested by hand by farmers typically are not particularly profitable, but green beans as a pick your own crop can be profitable. Sweet corn is a very popular pick your own crop. Important to educate consumers in the assessment of ripeness on sweet corn. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers are also good choices for vegetable pick your own. Now, to make a general statement about vegetables, those vegetables that are good choices are vegetables that have clear cues for ripeness. You know, there are some vegetables, for example, that you harvest the vegetative part and they can be harvested at any stage from very small to mature. These are good candidates for pick your own. There are some vegetables that have very clear cues. A tomato is a good example, typically harvested when they're vine ripe. But there are other vegetables where it's a bit more confusing, a bit more subtle, and these may not be as good a choice for pick your own crops. Pumpkins are a traditional pick your own crop, and farmers will grow pumpkin fields that are then harvested for pick your own in the fall. Now, the reality of pick your own pumpkins is that the crop can be exhausted after a particularly busy weekend in September. And many farmers who are doing pick your own pumpkins will then resalt the fields with pumpkins grown in other fields or perhaps purchased pumpkins to extend the usefulness of that particular pick your own field. Lots of interest in the standard orange jack-o'-lantern, but there's also interest in specialty pumpkins, those that are very large, those that are very small, those that might be colors other than orange. So don't be afraid to consider specialty pumpkins. Periodically, there'll be a farmer with an interest in pick your own with an unusual specialty crop. And this can certainly be a viable way to market crops, but there are some reality checks when it comes to unusual specialty crops. First of all, these may be crops that are unfamiliar to the consumer, particularly when it comes to seasonality of when the crop is ready and understanding how best to harvest those crops. So typically there'll need to be additional promotion and advertising with unusual specialty crops, and there'll need to be an education process from the farmer to the consumer when the consumer arrives to harvest the crop. This is a picture showing pawpaw. Now, pawpaw in many ways is a good crop for pick your own. It's a small statured tree. The fruit ripens more or less uniformly, but if I were to ask you when do pawpaws ripen, probably 8 out of 10 people would not have a good idea when that crop is ready. And if I were to say, well, how do you assess ripeness in a pawpaw? Again, there are a large number of people who would be unfamiliar as far as the best stage at which to pick the pawpaw. So hence the need for advertising and promotion with unusual specialty crops and the need for education. And then the third consideration, it can be a challenge to come up with appropriate pricing. We'll talk more about pricing for pick your own crops here in a moment. But when you're working with an unusual specialty crop where there is no history of pricing on that crop, it can be a challenge to come up with a price that accurately reflects the value of that crop. Okay, if anyone would like to unmute and ask any questions as far as specific crops for pick your own, we can tackle that right now. So do
Hi,
we have
Patrick.
it? Yes.
It's Hannah with Springfield Community Gardens. I'm so
Hi,
sorry
Hannah.
to be late.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Have we had time to do the introduction?
Yes, I went ahead and shared the information that we typically share at the beginning of our presentation. So we're in good shape on that.
Okay, wonderful. Just so everyone knows, I'm here on behalf of Springfield Community Gardens, and I will be here to see if you have anything that you would like to post in the chat, or if you have any Q&As that you may need. So sorry for being late.
Oh, no problem, Hannah. Thanks for joining us. And Hannah will be monitoring the Q&A, watching for questions. And Hannah, I think periodically during the presentation, since we're a fairly small group, I'll pause, and if anyone would like to unmute and share a question or share an experience, that would be perfectly wonderful. So at this point, does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
All right, well, I'll be here in case anybody does.
Okay, very good. All right, again, feel free to unmute at this point.
It appears as though Jedediah has raised his hands. Let me see. All right, I have asked Jedediah to unmute if he would like. All right. All right. We'll wait for Jedediah to respond. Anytime you're ready, Jedediah, let us know. Okay, let me see. Talking is permitted for everyone in the chat. So if you would like to unmute your own personal Zoom, we can hear what you have to say. There was a question in the chat as to the ability to chat. So okay. Yeah, that is a possibility.
Okay. Yes. And if we have issues with unmuting, again, that's fine. Sometimes there are problems on our end or on the attendee's end. But if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the Q&A, and Hannah will keep an eye on those.
All right.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and talk a bit about the planning process for Pick Your Own. So it really can't be stressed that location is important. With Pick Your Own, you're inviting people out to the farm, but the people are coming from somewhere. And we've learned a lot about location and population through a number of different research projects and numerous surveys of Pick Your Own farms. And to sum all of those studies and surveys up, it appears that most customers will travel 20 miles or less to a Pick Your Own farm. Generally, the number that we see on surveys is about 75 to 80% will travel 20 miles or less. Now, that other 20% will travel further than 20 miles, and particularly if it's to a farm where there is a crop in particular demand and in a short supply. So customers have reported driving up to 50 miles to a pick your own farm. But again, the majority of customers will come from 20 miles or less to a pick your own farm. We've also learned that there needs to be a base population to support pick your own production, to support the marketing of crops through pick your own. And a number of research studies agree that a ratio for, if we were to look at a couple of crops here, like pick your own strawberries, for example, a ratio of about 1 acre of pick your own production will require about 2,000 people living within 20 miles to support that 1 acre of strawberry production. With sweet corn, it's a bit higher. It's 1 acre of, or it's 5,000 people per acre of production within 20 miles. So somewhere between 1 acre or somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 people per acre within 20 miles is probably a good benchmark to use when looking around to see, first of all, if there's anyone else doing pick your own, and secondly, to help you understand the scale of your farm from the standpoint of how much you might consider planning and marketing through pick your own. Now, it's not just base population. Farmers can take advantage of transient population. These would be people who drive by the farm location, or perhaps people that are seasonally coming by. You know, for example, if the farm is located on a road on the way to a destination, a seasonal destination, for example, this can be an advantage. To give you an example, I had a chance to travel to Washington State last year in early July, and that corresponded with the sweet cherry season. And I passed several pick your own sweet cherry orchards. Now, these orchards were in rural areas. There definitely was not 2,000 people within 20 miles of many of these orchards, but there were lots of people traveling by the orchard on their way to vacation destinations. So again, transient population can be helpful, and you can gather this information from highway counts here in Missouri by the Missouri Department of Transportation. This information is available for the request. It can also be helpful to have attractions in your area. We have a number of rural pick your own farms in the Branson area. Branson is a large vacation destination, entertainment area. Lots of people come to Branson. And oftentimes while they're there, they're also interested in learning more about the local agriculture. And so they'll come to visit the pick your own farms that are within an easy drive of Branson. Base population of Branson is not that great, but the base population is complemented by the tourists and others who come to that area. Ease of access is important as well. You need to have good roads to your farm. Not all people coming to your farm are going to be driving four-wheel drive pickup trucks with high clearance. And so it's very helpful to have good roads, all-weather roads leading to your farm. Also very important to have adequate on-site parking available at the farm. And you know, how much parking? Generally, most pick your own farmers would say more than I have. So provide for adequate on-site parking. And there are guidelines based upon expected customer counts and the number of parking spaces needed. We'll talk a bit more about that here in a moment as well. And then the overall farm should be clean. There should be family-friendly facilities. If we look at this picture, a lovely example of a pick your own blueberry farm. And you can see, again, nice wide aisles, well-kept areas for movement among the plants. Looking towards the back of this picture, that's the parking area. It's adjacent to the berry patch. So again, a short distance from the parking area to the patch. And if we could look at the parking area, we would notice that there is easily room for 40 or 50 cars near this planting, which is adequate for most days of harvest. So again, ease of access is important as well. Now, not all situations are ideal for pick your own, but it is possible to overcome some of these obstacles. First of all, offering unique products. And blueberries, again, good case in point. In most areas of southern Missouri, in fact, in most areas of Missouri, there's a shortage of locally grown blueberries. And just the fact that there might be blueberries available at a pick your own farm can be a huge draw. And people will come some distance, perhaps offering other unique products such as those unique specialty crops that I mentioned earlier. It can be helpful to offer multiple products. So we see this frequently with pick your own farms that are oriented on fall experiences, where there may be a number of different crops that are grown that have a similar harvest season. Exceptional service, do something special, provide something that sets your farm above other farms. And then distinctive experiences can be of interest as well. The idea of harvesting your own mushrooms, which is definitely a distinctive experience, might be an example of how a farm in a rural area could overcome some of the challenges to not having a strong resident or transient population. Now, it has to be mentioned that there may be zoning or codes in place that could limit or restrict what a pick your own farm might want to do. Typically, this is an urban or suburban situation. Looking at this farm here in a rural area, probably zoning and codes are not of great concern. But if you're interested in establishing a pick your own farm in an urban or a suburban area, it's in your interest to check with your local planning and zoning officials to make sure that there are no restrictions on what you'd like to do on your farm. Let's talk a bit about competition and market potential. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a tool called the Missouri Ag Intel Tool, which is a tool developed by University of Missouri to help guide farmers in determining where competition is and what market potential might be for a specific farm site. So let's take just a moment here and take a look at the Ag Intel tool. And I'll need to stop share and then reshare with the website here. So let's take a quick look at this.
I do want to mention that I have submitted the links to the surveys in regards to the USDA if you guys would like to fill this out after the workshop. This is to help with the, sorry, give me one moment. The survey is used in Springfield Community Gardens reporting to the USDA and also helps us provide meaningful workshops in the future. So please choose to fill that out after the survey. The link is in the chat. Thanks so much.
Okay, so here is the Missouri Ag Intel tool. It's easy to find. A simple Google search will bring you right to this site. And you'll notice that there are a number of buttons that you could consider here. The large one in the middle, what should I grow? There's also crop suitability maps, which help you understand if your site is suitable for the crops you're considering. There's a site where you can assess your management capabilities. Also some thoughts on the characteristics of alternative crops. But the button we're going to look at is the Food Market Evaluation Tool. So we'll click on that. And this brings us to the tool. And it starts out with a map, and we'll take a look here. We want to basically look at, hold on a moment. Let's go ahead and zoom in on Southwest Missouri. In fact, let's zoom in on the town where my office is located, which is Marshfield. Right there. And so we'll develop a report on the location that looks at what's happening within 10, 20, and 30-mile radius of Marshfield. Marshfield here is at the very center, and you can see the circles radiating out. So let's take a look at what that report tells us. So first of all, if we look at the number of people that live near Marshfield, within 10 miles, there's over 20,000 people. Within 20 miles, there's over 80,000 people, and within 30 miles, there's over 400,000 people. Of course, this is because of the proximity of Marshfield to Springfield, the greater Springfield area. And so with this information in hand, we can go back to those numbers that we were talking about, 1 acre needing 2,000 people within 20 miles to give us a feel for how much pick your own production of strawberries might be supported by the area around Marshfield. And so again, looking at these circles, this will give us an idea. So looking at a resident population of 20,000 people, that gives us to understand that we can support somewhere around 10 acres of pick your own strawberries. Now, at this point, we do a little homework and we try to learn who else is doing what we're doing or what we're contemplating doing within those 10, 20, and 30-mile radii of marsh field to give us a feel whether there's room for expansion, room for additional production in those areas. We can also look at down here at demographics to give us a feel for the income levels of the people who live in the areas that we're considering for production. And obviously, if we're looking for people who might have disposable income that's available to spend on the crops that we're considering growing. We can also look down here at the competitive analysis, and this gives us a feel for who else is doing what we're considering doing. Now, it doesn't tell us if they're specifically doing pick your own, but we can look at the competitive analysis within that 30-mile radius of marsh field, and we notice that, actually, no, this is within the county. So if we look at Webster County, we have 41 vegetable farms, we have 15 berry farms, we have 13 orchards. Not a lot of production. If we look at the berry farms, there's only 25 acres of production. So with this in mind, and the understanding of 2,000 people can support an acre of strawberries, this gives us a pretty good feel that yes, there is definitely room for expansion in the Webster County Marshfield area. So the Ag Intel tool can be very helpful to farmers who are considering specialty crop production and specifically considering growing and marketing through Pick Your Own. Okay, let's go ahead and reduce this back here, and we'll come back to our presentation here. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into the presentation. Now, another aspect of Pick Your Own planning is thinking about the crop mix. And we talked about some potential crops for Pick Your Own and some of their characteristics. And now it's time for the farmer to consider what they would like to grow. Now, yes, there may be some specifics related to the farm itself. For example, it can be a challenge to grow blueberries on a farm with a soil that is not at least somewhat suitable for blueberry production. But if we sort of put that to the side and look specifically at Pick Your Own marketing, there are some farms that are single crop farms. There are a number of berry farms, for example, that are exclusively blueberries or exclusively blackberries. We have a number of cut flower farms that are exclusively cut flowers. We can also have farms that are season-specific farms. For example, fall harvest. Fall is an exciting time on many farms where there might be apples, pumpkins, fall raspberries, perhaps other crops that are harvested within that period of September, October, and November. There can also be summer harvest farms, those farms that focus on crops such as peaches, blackberries, blueberries, perhaps summer vegetables. And then some farms set themselves up as sequential harvest farms, where their goal is to cover a broader part of the season. And a good example would be a berry farm that's focused on strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, and fall raspberries, where the harvest season might run from late April through October. Now, again, finding the right mix is partly the characteristics of the crop, but it's also what the producer is interested in. And there's also other factors that can enter to this as well. For example, if your farm is located where there is lots of transient population during the summer when people are vacationing, then it might make sense to focus on summer harvest type crops. So again, take a look at the whole package. Take a look at not just the crops themselves, but the interest of the farmer and the characteristics of the population in the area. It's also of interest for farmers to not only focus on the fresh crops that they're growing, but look at complementary products, attractions, or market channels to add value to what they're doing on the farm. And a common way that this is done is through the development of on-farm retail sales. And these sales, yes, would include the harvested crop, but they might also include pre-picked product. There are people who come to a Pick Your Own farm that perhaps they're under time constraints, and yes, they'd like to pick some product, but they'd also like to purchase some product that is already harvested. So this could be an opportunity. There could also be value-added products that are made from the crops grown on the farm. We see 3 examples here from Persimmon Hill Berry Farm near Branson, where the farm produces jellies, The farm produces various types of cooking sauces, and the farm also produces baked goods such as thunder muffins. There can also be complementary products, things such as retail sales of juices or wines that might complement a fresh product. Agritourism can be part of complementary channels marketing on the farm. So again, offering opportunities through things such as farm rides, through farm tours, through petting zoos, lots of different ways that we can enhance the actual pick your own aspect of a farm with other types of agritourism. And then food service can be part of the experience on the farm as well. So things such as fruit-based slushies or donuts or pies, or as we see here, the thunder muffins, can all be ways to capitalize on the presence of the person at the farm. Perhaps they're there with the initial thought of pick your own harvest, but they also may be interested in some of these other retail sales that are available. Now, pick your own planning definitely focuses on operations layout and design. And a good design will decrease confusion and frustration later on. So it's definitely worth putting some time and effort into developing the layout and design of the farm. And this is a good place to hire a consultant or to check with others and learn from their experiences, because oftentimes it can be difficult to visualize all the nuances of design and layout. So again, don't be afraid to reach out for help in this area. Oftentimes the decisions made here are long-lasting decisions, long-term decisions. So it's very important to have assistance and educated guidance in doing this right. From the standpoint of the customer, good operations layout and design will enhance the overall experience at the farm. Now, some of the considerations in layout and design. First of all, how many or what types of vehicles would you like to have entering and exiting the farm? Are we looking just at passenger vehicles, or would we like to be able to accommodate tour buses, perhaps? How many vehicles? Are we expecting just a few vehicles at a time, or could there be very busy weekends where we might have 25 or 30 cars present? How many customers do we expect? We can get a feel for this based upon the population numbers that we discussed earlier. Let's figure out a way where we can separate traffic from pedestrians. Again, a very important aspect of risk management is to keep people out of harm's way from vehicles. Let's think about ways to provide for a good flow of customers from the parking area to the check-in area where they receive instructions and picking containers, to the picking fields where they have that fabulous experience of harvesting the crop, to retail sales where we can look at some of those add-ons or other enterprises that might be part of the farm, to the checkout where they pay for their purchases, and then back to parking. Let's figure out a way to do this efficiently and effectively. Always helpful to minimize the distance from parking to check-in and from parking to check-out. That way people, as they arrive, can be very quickly moved to the check-in area where they'll again be out of harm's way from the standpoint of traffic, and they can move quickly from the checkout area back to their cars. Let's think about the placement of restrooms. Very important that people have access to restrooms at all time, but particularly as they arrive at the farm before they enter the field. And it's a good practice, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, to provide restrooms and also hand washing facilities, and to insist that customers wash their hands before they enter the field. So let's make this convenient and easy to do. Let's think about the placement of concessions. If we want to make available drinks, for example, let's think about where we're going to place the availability of those drinks relative to the harvest fields. Let's think about the availability of rest areas, covered areas, seating areas relative to the harvest fields. And then let's think about farm operations versus pick your own operations. There are some things that we have to do on the farm to manage the crop or to manage other parts of the farm, for example, that might include noisy machinery or implements that could possibly be of danger to pick your own customers. So let's figure out how we're going to integrate farm operations with pick your own operations. And again, I said this early on, this is a great time to solicit or to find some help, some assistance. Hire a consultant, check with your extension specialist, take a look at how other farmers have done it. Join a group such as the North American Direct Farm Market Association to learn about the experiences of successful pick your own farms. Here's a nice example, an aerial view of a pick your own farm. And this farm is a farm that has orchards, has berries, and also has some other smaller type crops. And you can clearly see the entrance to the farm. You can see the parking area. If we look at the buildings in the center, the large building on the upper side of the photo, that is the check-in area. That's also an area where there are storage facilities for pre-picked crops. The smaller building directly below that is the retail area and also the checkout area. And so customers arrive, they go into the large building, that's check-in. They receive instructions. They also board the wagons that take them out to the orchards or the berry fields. And then they come back in. They can go to the retail area on their way to the checkout. Then they check out. Then they load their product into their vehicles, and then they leave. Now, there is the possibility of congestion in this particular design. There's also just the reality that farmers will have to walk across the parking area to get to their cars. And these would be disadvantages of this particular layout. But again, looking at all of these considerations can help you come up with a reasonable layout for your farm. Now, if you're a new farmer and you have a blank slate, fabulous. You've got lots of opportunities to do things right. If you're an existing farm and you'd like to adapt that to pick your own farming, again, bring in a consultant or someone with experience to help you understand how your existing facilities can be integrated into a efficient and effective design. Okay, does anyone have any questions at this point?
It appears there are no questions at this time, but please feel free to post in the Q&A and we can bring those up.
And I'll echo that. Please, if you have any questions, post.
Patrick, it seems as though you've been put on mute. We can't hear you. Something happened to your audio? Patrick, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Oh, now I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I'm changing microphones and hopefully that will help.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so can you hear me now, Hannah? Is the audio good?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, very good. Well, the placement of plantings is important. And again, particularly with perennial crops like berries, tree crops, you don't want to make mistakes initially because they can be difficult or impossible to correct. So the placement is very important. You want to think about the layout between the plantings. You want to allow adequate space between rows for customer flow. People don't like to be harvesting adjacent rows close to other customers. So allow plenty of space for harvesting. Allow adequate space between plantings, and also allow adequate space at the ends of rows, particularly if you'll be transporting customers with wagons or through some other means. Think about with annual and biennial crops, certainly you have more flexibility, but there are still standard spacings to consider between beds of things such as cut flowers and vegetables. And oftentimes these spacings are wider than would typically be the case on a farm that is strictly for production. Because again, you're inviting people to the farm. You want to provide an experience where they don't feel cramped or crowded, where they feel that they're having plenty of room to walk around the plants and to harvest the crop. So oftentimes the spacings between rows or between beds will be greater than it will be strictly for production. Think about the layout of plantings of early ripening versus later ripening. It's a good example here would be in the case of blueberries. If a farmer is planting early ripening blueberries, mid-season blueberries, and later ripening blueberries, farmers report that it's better to have the early ripening blueberries closest to the check-in point where people will encounter them first. And that way those berries will be harvested before the mid-season berries are going to be considered. And if you're walking by, for example, a planting of mid-season ripening crop, and you're being directed to go to the early season ripening crop, and that crop is just about done, but the farmer still wants you to get the last little bit, but you can see an abundance of berries on the mid-season plants, it's very tempting to take a quick detour into the mid-season area, even though it's not time to harvest that particular crop. So try to eliminate some of those situations by the way plantings are laid out. Now, of course, we have to focus on the quality of the harvested crop. People are expecting top quality products when they come to a pick your own farm. But we also have to think about aesthetics. People want to have a pleasant experience on the farm, and they expect a well-maintained farm. In fact, in some cases, farmers say that they expect a well-groomed farm. But it is important that the impression that a customer has is of a well-maintained farm. We also have to think about liability. And from that standpoint, we want to lay out plantings in such a way that we can hopefully foresee potential issues and overcome those. You know, for example, having irrigation lines under the fabric, as we do in this planting, removes those irrigation lines as a tripping hazard. Also, having a planting setup like this with a trellis in place will keep people from cutting across rows and potentially tripping as they move across the planting. You're channeling people into the area between the rows of plants. And again, this area is maintained in a very smooth situation. Any holes are filled in, any ruts are taken care of. You want to do everything you can, again, to reduce the exposure to risk. A bit more on parking and customer flow. Very important to clearly mark entrances. You want people to know exactly where they need to enter the farm, and very clearly mark parking areas. It can be in your interest to actually mark parking spots so that people know where they need to park. And then also mark clearly the exit routes so that the flow of traffic is as you want it. And again, ideally, the entrance and the exit will not be at the same point. Now, granted, in many farms, this is the unavoidable situation, but if it's possible to have separate entrances and exits, that will greatly enhance the flow of traffic. As I said before, figure out a way to keep people away from traffic. Develop clear paths that people can take from where they park to where they check in and move into the product fields. Direct or develop clear paths of travel to check-in areas, as I just said, and also to check out areas so people need to, or so that people understand where those areas are. And plan to accommodate lines. There will be periods of time on busy weekends where people will be lined up to perhaps to enter a farm at the check-in area, or perhaps to check out at the cash registers. So make sure that you have provision for lines. And something to consider here would be shaded areas or perhaps refreshment areas where these lines are located. Good customer flow can also reduce theft. If you can figure out ways to direct people from the harvest field to the retail area or to the checkout area without a lot of distance between the 2 points, it can remove some of the opportunity for theft. And then combine good signage with oral directions. Yes, it's important to tell people, to guide people through oral discussions, but it's also important to reinforce that with good signage. They go hand in hand, and they both need to be present on the farm. Okay, let's talk a bit about packaging and transport. And again, in a pick your own setting, customers are invited to come to the farm and harvest the crop. But this typically means that some sort of harvest container is provided to the customer. Now, in past years, customers were encouraged to bring their own containers. But in our current atmosphere of produce food safety, this is typically not a good risk management plan. It's also not a good plan to have used containers used that will actually contact the harvested product. Now, let's think about some of the characteristics of good packaging, and it's directly related to the characteristics of the crop. If we're harvesting something like blackberries or raspberries, and particularly raspberries, which are very fragile, These are best harvested in either small containers or very shallow containers. So they can be harvested directly into pint or half pint boxes, or they could be harvested into shallow flats. But typically we don't want these berries any deeper than say 2 to 3 deep. Blueberries are a bit more durable, and they can actually be packed into gallon buckets as you see here. Now it's a common practice to line the bucket with a plastic bag, and that plastic bag prevents the berries from contacting the sides of the bucket, which reduces the risk related to produce food safety contamination. Then it also is very convenient at the checkout, where the bag can be pulled out of the bucket, a twisty put onto the bag, and then the bag of berries can be weighed for checkout purposes. For tree fruits and vegetables, typically boxes or single-use or new bags are used for these crops. And then for cut flowers, typically buckets that have some water and perhaps a preservative mix in the bucket. These are taken to the field. The cut flowers are cut and placed in the bucket. And then when they're brought to the checkout area, the flowers are placed into plastic sleeves for the customer to take home. Now, from the standpoint of transport, we know from grower surveys and also research that if the farmer provides transport of the harvested product from the field to the checkout area or the car, then this can actually encourage larger sales. Frequently, if the farmer offers to bring, for example, a bucket of blueberries into the sales area and brings another empty bucket with them, the customer will say, "Oh, these berries are so great, I think I'd like another bucket." And you can easily hand that bucket to them and encourage a larger volume of sales. Berry flats, as we see here in this picture, this flat is intended to fit 6 pints of berries. You can send the customer out with a flat with 6 pints in, and almost inevitably, the carrier will come back with 6 full pints of berries. On the other hand, if you had sent the customer out with, allowing them to choose 1 or 2 quart baskets, that might be all you sell. It can also be helpful to use a larger size container with more durable type products like vegetables, and then providing wagons to help bring crop back can be helpful as well. And particularly with heavier products like pumpkins, perhaps, or melons, or even boxes of tree fruits, helping customers with transport is an important part of customer service, and customers will definitely appreciate that. You've invited these customers to the farm. It's important to provide a good environment, a good experience for them. So having some customer comfort considerations in place is very important. Access to clean restroom facilities is just paramount. The idea of not having clean restroom facilities on a pick your own farm that's in the past. It's important to provide clean restroom facilities with adequate hand washing for all customers at pick your own farms. Providing shelter from weather conditions, perhaps a covered area where people can come in out of the heat if they need to, perhaps a covered area if unexpected storm descends upon a planting. Access to water or other refreshments, very important, particularly in the heat of the summer, to keep people, first of all, from overheating, which is, of course, a health risk, but also just to keep them comfortable during their farm experience. Seating can be very helpful, and providing seating adjacent to the harvest area can be helpful. For example, if a group comes and there may be several members of that group that are just there to enjoy the company of the people they're with, and they'll pick a few berries or a few apples or peaches or whatever it might be, and then they'll leave the rest of the picking to other members of the group, and they're looking for a place to sit down and relax. Pet facilities. It's not a good food safety practice to allow pets into harvest fields, but almost inevitably people will arrive with their pets. And providing a facility for these pets can be very helpful from the standpoint of the experience of the customer on the farm. It's not a good idea to leave pets behind in a closed, locked car. And then children's activities. It can be a huge draw for customers if there are activities for their children. And again, research and surveys have shown us that many of the customers at Pick Your Own Farms are young families or perhaps mothers that come with their children for outings during the week. So providing children's activities can greatly enhance the experience for the overall family at the Pick Your Own Farm. What are some children's activities? Well, it can be something as simple as as a large box full of shelled corn, or a play area in a sandbox, or perhaps some toys to play on, perhaps I've seen, for example, trains that are constructed with a motorized train at the head, and little wagons that are pulled behind for children. There are lots of interesting creative activities that can be developed for children. Now, some thoughts on hours and days of operation. Now, obviously, we want to think about maximizing profitability and sales at a pick your own farm. And that means that we need to select hours of operation that are convenient to customers. But we also have to think about hours of operation that fit your lifestyle. For example, if you don't want to be open on Sunday, that's fine. Don't be open on Sunday. Be open during posted hours if at all possible. You know, if you have posted hours in your website, your social media posts, and your printed posts, then it's very important to stick to those posted hours, if at all possible. Now, granted, life happens, weather happens, sometimes crops are picked out. And if that's the case, then figure out a way where you can let people know that you won't be open during what would normally be an open time. And this can be done effectively through social media, which we'll talk about here in a moment. It is important to commit to weekends and evening times, though, because these are the times that people have available to come to a pick your own farm. So again, at least Saturdays and then evenings need to be times that you have the farm open. Consider early hours, especially in the summer. It's much more comfortable for people to pick early in the day in the heat of June, July, and August than it is later on in the day. So consider early hours, and perhaps have most of the harvest done by 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the morning. This is also the period of time when the quality of most products is higher. You know, for example, the quality of berries like blueberries and brambles generally begins to decline after 10 o'clock on a warm, dry day. So harvesting early in the day can actually provide the customers with higher quality, more durable product. And then make sure that your hours are consistent across all of your advertising and media. If you post your farm on third-party sites, make sure the hours there are consistent as well. And oftentimes these sites, they don't automatically update if you update other areas. So if you've posted on a third-party website, for example, and you're going to change your hours because of seasonality or some other issue, go back to the original posting and make sure that it's up to date. Communicating with customers is key to success with Pick Your Own. People have to know, first of all, that you're there, then they have to know what you have available, and then they have to know how they can become part of the experience. Social media can be very effective at communicating with customers. Traditionally, Pick Your Own farms maintain contact lists and used US mail to reach out to customers. This is still done to some degree, but in many cases, this has been largely replaced with social media. Now, these communications with customers are very important at the beginning and the end of season, just to let people know that the season is beginning or the season will soon be ending, but they're also useful for short notice information. So for example, if a field has been picked out and you won't have crop available for another week and you had planned to be open in between, then you can send out information via social media to let people know. If there's been a storm and a portion of the crop has been lost, you can let people know through social media as well. So again, use all of these ways to communicate with your customers. Customers appreciate that that touch from you, that communication from you as a pick your own farmer, and they will respond appropriately. Now, what about communicating with customers actually at the farm? Again, it's all about that interpersonal relationship that a pick your own customer develops with the farmer. That is one of the draws for pick your own farming. And it's very important that these communications be done in a, first of all, of course, in an effective way, but also in a way that is appropriate and friendly and welcoming. Now, part of the direct communication would be farm rules. And, for example, we can see here, these are all pictures from Persimmon Hill Berry Farm. You can see the farm rules down there. How to harvest. Oftentimes, this is done in an oral fashion by demonstrating how to harvest. It can also be done effectively through signage. And then produce food safety. There may be some basic farm rules that need to be communicated, things such as the need to wash your hands before entering the field and washing your hands after you use the restroom facilities, or washing your hands after you've, your hands have touched things like bird droppings or animals or those sorts of things. Signage can be helpful from all of these reasons, but also for things such as hours of operation and pricing and directions, and just getting to the farm and knowing where the entrance is and knowing where the parking is. Now, one of the draws for pick your own farming, pick your own marketing for farmers, again, is the reduced need for harvest labor, but that definitely does not mean that you don't need labor. Oftentimes the labor just shifts into other areas. Some of the things that you may need labor for would be parking. You may need labor to greet customers at check-in and to share with them the farm rules and give them picking containers and let them know how things are going to work during their time at the farm. You may need labor to transport customers to the picking fields by driving a tractor or a wagon or whatever it might be. There may need to be staff in the field, directing people as far as where to pick and how to understand ripeness and how to pick the crops. We may need people to transport containers and product to or from the field. We're definitely going to need cashiers at checkout. We may need a crew to come back and clean up harvest after the pick your own customers have left. This part of the crop, of course, can be used for value-added products, or perhaps could be used for pre-picked sales. We'll need someone to take care of social media activity. And again, those farmers that use social media effectively use social media frequently. And there may be other farm activities that we need labor for as well. But we definitely haven't removed the need for labor by shifting to pick your own farming. We've just redirected how we use that labor. Now, some thoughts on liability and risk management. And again, we always want to be thinking about liability risk in all aspects of developing and managing a pick your own farm. Certainly during the planning process, we want to think about ways that we can develop traffic flow versus pedestrian flow and keep the two separate. We want to think about ways that we can reduce any risks that might be present. That could be issues related to tripping or falling. We want to make sure that while we're actually operating the pick your own, that fields are clean, that there's no equipment where a person could injure themselves. Again, that there's no tripping or falling risks like irrigation lines or rodent holes or anything else that could cause problems. Liability insurance is a must. And how much liability insurance? A number of references suggest at least a $2 million umbrella policy for the farm, and then perhaps liability protection for the product itself. For more information on risk management and liability, University of Missouri Extension has developed an excellent guide on liability insurance. So take a look at that. And there is a law in place in a number of states, including Missouri, that actually provide liability protection for agritourism farms. And in Missouri, this is called the Missouri Agritourism Promotion Act. And it actually provides liability protection for farms involved in agritourism. And pick your own is considered to be agritourism. There are some requirements that the farm register and also that the farm post specific signage. For details, you can check out the Missouri Revised Statutes 537.862. And here is the wording that must be posted at the farm. Warning, under Missouri law, there is no liability for an injury or death of a participant in a registered agritourism activity conducted at this registered agritourism location, if such injury or death results from the inherent risks of such agritourism activity. Inherent risks of agritourism activities include, but are not limited to, the potential of you as a participant to act in a negligent manner that may contribute to your injury or death, and the potential of another participant to act in a negligent manner that may contribute to your injury or death. You are assuming the risk of participating in this registered agritourism activity. So this wording must be posted at farms that are registered with the Missouri Agritourism law. Well, what about some thoughts on pricing and payment? Now, pricing can be one of the more challenging aspects of pick your own farming. And yes, there are different ways to come up with pricing. You could certainly look around and see what others are pricing their products at. You can look at websites and blogs, but in reality, you really need to look at yourself to come up with pricing that is first of all, takes into mind the cost of producing the crop, and secondly, takes into mind the realities of the people that are purchasing that crop from you. So certainly you need to have a clear understanding of the cost of production. You should be understanding your customer demographics, values, and preferences. The Missouri Ag Intel tool can help you understand, for example, income levels of the customers that might likely be visiting your pick your own farm. You want to have a feel for the competition. If you're the only blueberry pick your own farm for 40 or 50 miles, then there's no competition there. And that may mean that you may be able to realize a bit higher price on your crop. On the other hand, if there are 15 blueberry farms within 30 miles of your farm, then you're going to have to carefully look at the price you charge for your pick your own crop. And then, of course, your business goals. Are you doing this with the idea of maximizing income? Are you doing this as a part-time farming opportunity? Are you doing this for various other reasons? And then you need to be able to answer that question. Should you charge the same, more or less, for pick your own versus pre-picked? Who are you competing against? And again, research and surveys have demonstrated that the people who come to pick your own farms typically don't have a clear conception in their mind as far as what the crop should be worth. And if that crop is priced, within reason, obviously, frequently there are other factors that are more important from the standpoint of the satisfaction of the customer than the price of the crop. Things such as the experience on the farm, the appearance of the farm, the interaction with the farmer. These are as important, if not more important, than the actual price of the product. In most cases, to answer that final question, most farmers are charging the same for pick your own crops as for pre-picked crops. Obviously, there is harvest labor in the pre-picked crop, but there is also labor involved in the pick your own crop, as we mentioned before. There's also the likelihood of lost crop with pick your own. A portion of what customers harvest falls to the ground or is otherwise lost. In some cases, a portion of it is consumed. And so charging the same price for pick your own as for pre-picked berries makes sense in most settings. Now, as far as pricing and payment, in many cases, products are priced by the pound. This would be the case, for example, with blueberries. There are some products that are priced by the unit. A good example would be cut flowers, crops such as pumpkins or sweet corn. These are typically priced by the unit, in some cases by the individual crop unit, or perhaps a unit such as a dozen stems or whatever it might be. Now, if pricing is done by the pound in Missouri, the scales that are used for these sales must be certified as to their accuracy by the Missouri Department of Agriculture. And this picture shows a scale being certified. Keep in mind that when purchasing scales, not all scales can be certified. And it's important that when you're considering a scale, that you reach out for some guidance as to whether or not that particular scale can be certified. And the Missouri Department of Agriculture is very helpful from the standpoint of steering farmers to scales that can be certified.
Patrick, we do have a comment in the chat.
Yes.
Dwight has said that the Farm Bureau has signs available for agritourism and for livestock also.
Yes, that is the case. As I was researching this presentation, I spent some time on the Missouri Farm Bureau website. And the Farm Bureau has a strong interest in promoting agritourism. And they have some very helpful educational information on the Missouri agritourism law. And also they can provide the appropriate signage that is necessary for farms to post at their farms. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. Do we have any other questions at this point?
Not at this time.
Okay. Now let's talk a bit more about pricing and payment. From the standpoint of payment, customers expect farmers to accept debit or credit cards. And this just is a standard now. In the past, this was not the case, but particularly during the COVID era, when many customers expected contactless sales, farmers have accepted debit and credit cards, and this is going to be the case moving ahead. There are farms that are considering prepayment, where a customer can actually visit a on-farm store and prepay for a particular volume of product. And when they arrive at the farm, they're checked in, they're given the appropriate harvest container, sent out, they come back, they check out, and again, the payment has already been made. Very important to communicate clearly with customers from the standpoint of payment. Nothing can be, well, I won't say nothing, but it can definitely be a tense situation if a customer harvests the quantity of product and they get to the checkout and find that the farmer does not accept a credit card and the customer did not come with cash. So be sure that you communicate clearly with customers the forms of payment that are accepted. But as I said before, be prepared to accept debit or credit cards. Now some thoughts on promotion. Again, an internet presence and social media activity are musts. The days are far behind us where farmers were not savvy when it comes to social media and online presence. You want to figure out the best approach for your demographics. You know, are these do your demographics include people who respond to mailings? Do your demographics include people who respond to Facebook or other social media posts? Very important to stay in touch with your customers and do this on a regular basis, at least weekly, and perhaps more frequently during the harvest season. Third-party directories or sites can be very helpful. Keep in mind that these are frequently passive ways of promoting, and they must be kept up to date too, particularly as things such as operation hours and locations change. Now, the traditional promotional methods are still important. You know, that sign at the local bank or perhaps the postcard mailing that goes out once a year are still important. And what is very important, of course, is word of mouth. And frequently, people belong to circles or groups, and when they have a positive experience, they share that positive experience with their acquaintances and others in their group. It's also important to recognize that they also share their unpleasant experiences as well. Okay, do we have any questions at this point?
No questions, but we have a comment from Dwight that says that there are similar laws for camping and needs for similar signs as well during camping.
Yes, that's certainly the case. Okay, well, again, feel free to put any questions you might have into the Q&A. And the final material we're going to cover tonight is related to produce food safety and pick your own. Now, before each harvest day, it's very important that the farmer walk through the areas that are going to be harvested that particular day and look for animal contamination. So again, you're looking for actual presence of animals. You're looking for manure, poop, excreta. You're also looking for crop destruction. And if you find evidence of destruction or contamination, then it's important to figure out what you're going to do. And typically these areas are marked, and an area around the marked area is set apart as an area that is not harvested. And in a pick your own setting, what this typically means is that the farmer will harvest all of the crop within that zone so that it's not accidentally harvested by the customer. And the flag is left in place and customers are alerted to the fact that there could be issues around that flag. And then again, any visible contamination is removed from the field before customers are allowed into the field. So again, what to do if there's contamination? Figure out what your no harvest zone is around the area of visible contamination. And the food safety regulations that are in place don't tell you specifically what that should be. It could be anywhere from 0 to 25 feet. A reasonable no harvest zone from a reasonable level or a reasonable contamination event where the contamination is confined would probably be somewhere between 2 to 5 feet around that area. Harvest container sanitation. We talked about this earlier, but the idea of using totes, buckets, buskets, whatever it might be for harvesting is great, but these should be provided by the farmer and they must be kept in a clean and sanitary condition. Now, a good way to reduce cross-contamination from a container that might have soil on it to the crop itself is to use a plastic bag liner. And we can see in this checkout spot here with these blueberries, the plastic bag liner is placed in the bucket, it's sent out to the field. The pick your own customer harvests into the plastic bag, and then when it's brought to the checkout area, the bag is pulled out of the bucket, a twisty is put on the bag, the bag of berries is weighed, the customer pays, and they take the bag home. Now, that doesn't mean that these buckets should not be cleaned and sanitized regularly. Yes, they do stay relatively clean, but when they are visibly soiled, they must be cleaned and sanitized. And keep in mind that cleaning and sanitizing is a 4-step process. The first step is to rinse the buckets out with potable drinking water quality water, and then putting soap or detergent into the bucket, scrubbing the inside of the bucket, rinsing it again, and then using a sanitizer that is suitable for the purpose, and then allowing the bucket to either be rinsed or to air dry before it's used again. And then the bucket should be stored in such a way that they don't become contaminated again. Also important to remember, not only are you cleaning the inside of the bucket, but you need to clean the outside of the bucket, because inevitably buckets will be nested together during storage. And if a bucket is set on the ground, which it almost inevitably is during harvest, if you don't clean the outside of the bucket, when you put that bucket inside of a clean bucket, now the clean bucket is contaminated. Now, workers who are ill should not contact produce, and workers on the farm must wash their hands when they're contaminated. And hands can become contaminated in a number of different ways. Certainly after restroom use, after eating or drinking, after touching contaminated produce, after touching the ground, after touching animals. All of these are ways that hands can become contaminated. Now, harvest workers and pick your own customers must have access to potable water for hand washing. And harvest workers and customers must have access to toilet facilities. And it's federal law that these facilities must be within a 1/4 mile or 5 minutes of the harvest field. And if gloves are used, then the gloves must be changed or replaced with soil. Now, drop produce. There are laws in place that do not allow the harvest and sale of produce that has fallen to the ground. So when you're discussing harvest procedures with pick your own customers, let them know that if they drop a piece of produce onto the ground, they should not pick it up and place it into their container. Now, this, of course, doesn't include produce that normally grows on the ground. So things like melons and such are not considered to be dropped produce. And then there are also some produce items that are normally dropped before harvest, like nuts. And these two are not considered dropped produce. And the reason that these rules are in place, again, if an item such as a peach or a blueberry is dropped from any distance, when it hits the ground, frequently it's damaged, and almost inevitably it becomes contaminated with whatever might be in the soil. Again, just to reinforce, make sure that all containers that are used for that come into contact with the actual product are new and clean. Okay, any questions about food safety?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, now let's talk just a bit about 10 rules for visitors. And again, these are rules that pick your own farmers have shared with me over the years, and I've kind of boiled them down into 10 rules to think about. First of all, you need to have a visitor policy. And these rules all fall within the purview of a visitor policy. So again, you have to have a clear understanding of the expectations you have in place for anyone who comes to the farm. And that includes your pick your own customers. First of all, if you're not feeling well, don't come to the farm. Now, what does not feeling well mean? Well, it means, first of all, if you're suffering a fever, if you're losing any sort of bodily fluid from vomiting, from diarrhea, those sorts of things, if you're dehydrated, if you have an upset stomach, or if you have cramps, these are all evidence that a person is ill, and they should not be coming to the farm. Number 2, we don't want unaccompanied children at the farm. And, for obvious reasons, we want to make sure that the experience for children is a safe and happy experience, and ensuring the presence of a responsible adult will help make sure that this happens. So again, unaccompanied children should not be allowed at the farm. Wash your hands before picking. You want to be able to, you want to be sure to provide hand washing sinks, certainly at restroom areas, but also perhaps at the field entrance, at the check-in area. Have these available and make sure that customers use them. And remember that use of a hand sanitizer alone is not a replacement for thorough, adequate hand washing. Here's an example of a hand washing station. Hand washing stations don't have to be permanent installations. They can be pieces of equipment that are moved into and out of areas as the season progresses. And then at the end of the season, they can be washed, cleaned, sanitized, and put into storage. So again, provide a hand washing station. And even looking at this particular hand washing station, this you can improvise. All you really need for an adequate hand washing station is a reservoir of potable water, a way to dispense that water, a dispenser for soap, single-use towels, something to catch the wastewater and hold that water for disposal, and then someplace to dispose of the towels after they've been used. That's really all you need. And I've seen some very creative ways that farmers have satisfied those requirements. Remember that the field is not a toilet. Please don't water our plants. We have bathroom facilities and porta potties available. Do not allow diaper changing in the field. Diaper changing inevitably leads to contaminated hands, and then you've got the diaper to dispose of. And there have been situations where people have hid diapers among the crop, and this is not a good practice. And then again, as we said before, and we'll say again, wash hands before picking fruit. No eating, drinking, chewing gum, or smoking in the fields. And the reason for this is that as your hands touch your mouth and touch items that are in your mouth, almost inevitably they'll become contaminated, and that can very quickly spread to the crop that you're harvesting. So no eating, drinking, chewing gum, or smoking in the fields. Provide separate areas for people to eat, drink, to relax, perhaps have a smoking area, and then have hand washing facilities there that they can use before they then move into the harvest field. Do not litter in the field. Litter is a source of contamination. It also is definitely a negative from the standpoint of the aesthetic appeal of your farm. It definitely degrades the experience that others have if litter is present. So place all trash in trash cans. Have trash cans placed at strategic locations, certainly near hand washing stations. Have them placed near areas where people may be taking breaks and eating things. Place trash cans at the check-in area. Place a trash can at the check-out area. And do not feed wildlife. We don't want to encourage wildlife presence in pick your own fields.
Patrick, I do have a question.
Yes.
So I live in the Bay Area. I live fairly close to Napa, and currently there are several lawsuits at a couple of wineries due to the tours not providing sufficient handicap accessible areas to pick grapes. Is that a concern, and are there laws for that in Missouri?
To my knowledge, there are no laws in Missouri that force farmers to provide accessible picking situations. But it's in the farm's interest to, first of all, design plantings, design access, design traffic flow, all of these things with accessibility in mind. It just makes sense. If a farm is accessible, that benefits not only the people who have disabilities, but also people who are able-bodied. It just makes everything much easier. So my advice is to, during the planning process, to think about accessibility. And again, there are consultants, there are others who have experience in designing plantings that are accessible. And it doesn't take that much as far as additional effort, additional cost to design a planting that is accessible. There are also ways that you can accommodate people in wheelchairs. You can accommodate walkers. You can accommodate people who have limited mobility by providing surfaces that are suitable for those types of, or people with those types of disabilities. So again, if you ever have any questions about that, please reach out. University of Missouri Extension has specialists that are focused on accessibility issues, and would be happy to provide information and guidance in those areas.
Awesome.
So back to the pet issue. It's always important to set a good example, and nothing concerns me more when I go to a pick your own farm and see the farmer's dog or the farmer's cat running loose in produce fields. You know, again, it's a bit hypocritical to ask visitors, pick your own customers, not to bring their pets if your pets are present in the field. Granted, wildlife will be present in fields. It's just a reality of farms, but we can certainly restrict the presence of pets in fields. Now, service dogs are allowed in fields, but make sure that service dog handlers understand food safety risks and make sure that they take steps to minimize these risks. And it's very important to have a good communication with people who arrive with service animals. I just put this one in here. Don't drink water from hoses or sprinklers. First of all, in most cases, if you come upon a hose on the farm, the water coming through that hose is not a food grade hose, and the water that comes through it is not potable. Keep in mind that responsible pick your own farms need to provide water. Certainly you can provide water bottles for purchase, but it's a good practice to have free water available at all times. We provide picking containers and liners. Again, we've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. Make sure that you harvest from designated areas only. And it's a good practice on farms to flag or rope off areas that are not ready for harvest. It can be very tempting to walk by that mid-season blueberry planting where, yes, the berries are blue, but if you were to harvest those berries, they're not completely ripe. They would be tart. It would not be a good experience. So let's walk by those to the planting of the early ripening ones that are ready. It's also important that if plantings have received recent pesticide applications, that they have appropriate signage to warn people away from those plantings, and better yet, to flag or rope off those plantings as well. Some other safety tips: no running, wear closed-toed shoes, remove jewelry. Jewelry presents a food safety risk, and also there have been many situations where people have lost jewelry during pick your own outings, and it could be, again, it can be definitely a dampening effect on the experience at the farm. Watch out for insects and wild animals that might sting or bite. Keep a first aid kit at the farm at all times in case someone is injured. It's a good practice to keep an EpiPen handy in case someone is stung or bitten that has a sensitivity. And keep these certainly available at the check-in area, also at the checkout area. And then key personnel should have these kits, first aid kits, et cetera, available to them at all times. I should mention too that key personnel obviously should have cell phones available where they can call for assistance if needed in case of emergencies. And again, making visitors aware of your policies. Appropriate signage is helpful. The oral communications during check-in are very helpful. Some farms will actually have a visitor log where they ask people to sign in as they arrive at the farm. And again, here's an example of signage from a pick your own orchard. And again, it kind of goes over the things that we've already talked about, but having it in printed form posted is very helpful in reinforcing the oral directions that you give to the customers that arrive at your farm. And yes, you have to make people aware of your policies, and it needs to be done in a very clear fashion, but it can also be done in a supportive and sometimes even a humorous fashion. It doesn't have to be punitive in the message. Okay, well, that is the end of our prepared materials. Just again, a quick review. Very important to go through that thought process to, first of all, understand if you, as the farmer, are suited for pick your own, and also if your farm location is suitable. Make sure that you choose the appropriate pick your own crop. Definitely spend the time needed on planning a pick your own farm. And don't be afraid to reach out to consultants or to others with expertise. Visit lots of pick your own farms so you can get a feel for what works and where the success stories are. Operate your pick your own farm appropriately. Definitely have a focus on produce food safety. And all of these things combine to a successful pick your own and a good experience for both the farmer and for the customer who is invited to out to the farm to harvest the crop.
Patrick, we do have a question from Dwight.
Yes.
In regards to blueberries in Southwest Missouri, wondering if there are any issues with picking blueberries in Southwest Missouri.
Dwight, blueberries are an excellent crop for pick your own farms. And we have a number of long-time successful pick your own blueberry farmers. As far as issues, I don't know that I can think of any issues that would be specific to the pick your own experience. There are some challenges to growing the crop, and we could easily spend, in fact, we have spent entire workshops on growing blueberries. And in fact, I think we have a recording at the Springfield Community Gardens YouTube channel on blueberry production. But again, it's a crop that is nearly ideally suited for pick your own. And so particularly for farmers who are thinking about a first experience in pick your own, blueberries can be a good crop to start with. Do we have additional questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. Well, some resources that I found useful over the years: A Farmer's Guide to Pick Your Own Operation from the University of Tennessee. Here is that farm liability insurance publication that I mentioned. Marketing Vegetables in Missouri is another University of Missouri Extension guide that is helpful. And then the organization ATRA has developed a number of tip sheets for different methods of selling. And this particular tip sheet is for selling with agritourism and pick your own. So definitely check that out as well. And with that, I thank you for your attendance. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and discontinue sharing. And we will stay with you as long as you'd like, as far as any questions that you might have. Does anyone have any questions?
While we wait for people to submit questions, I would just like to thank you, Patrick, for being here. And I would also like to remind people that I have posted a survey in the chat in regards to Springfield Community Gardens reporting to the USDA. And we would really appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to fill this out after this workshop. And if you would like to refer to this workshop later, it'll be available on Springfield Community Gardens Agricultural Workshop playlist on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. I'll put that link to our website, or I have put the link to our website and also the YouTube link on the chat. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'll echo what Hannah just mentioned about the surveys. Please take just a few minutes, fill that out. That also gives me feedback. It helps me improve as an educator. And I really value the comments that you choose to share with me on those evaluations. So please take just a moment to fill that out. And again, thank you for joining us tonight for this workshop with Springfield Community Gardens and University of Missouri Extension. Oh, I see we have a question from Celestine. Do some people have a separate property for pick your own farm? Yes, they do. Again, with pick your own, you're inviting people to the farm, and that can sometimes be a challenge from the standpoint of maintaining privacy. If the pick your own field is just steps from your home, you're going to have people knocking on the door at all hours of the day interested in harvesting crop. And having a separate residence from the pick your own farm can be helpful. Also, separating pick your own aspects of a farm from other types of production and marketing can be helpful too. Again, as I mentioned before, equipment, other farm operations can sometimes interfere with pick your own operations. And so having separate areas can be very helpful from the standpoint of making that work. Do we have additional questions? Please enter those into the Q&A if there are. Okay. Well, Hannah, I think at this point, we may have another question.
Oh, yeah.
You pick green beans. Any special instructions needed? Well, Dwight, with you pick green beans, frequently what is done is a once over harvest. Inevitably, people are going to damage the plants as they harvest the beans. It's also important to focus on cultivars that have uniform ripening, where most of the pods will be at the same stage of maturity. And by doing that, of course, during the harvest process, even though you may be damaging the plant, you're still going to harvest a majority of the crop. And that's really about the best you can hope for with pick your own green beans, would be a single once over harvest.
Yeah, because there aren't any specific tools to pick green beans, unlike blueberries. Is that correct?
There actually are machines that can mechanically harvest green beans, and larger plantings that are selling green beans direct market will typically have some sort of machine to harvest the crop. Hand harvesting green beans for direct market sales typically is not profitable. There's just too much labor involved. Pick your own. Yes, that can work with green beans, but for other marketing approaches on green beans, typically they're going to be mechanically harvested.
It looks like we have another question from Dwight. I am planting the two sisters corn and beans. Could this be a problem for U-pick?
Yes, this could be a problem. Typically, when you're looking at the two or the three sisters approach, you're working with pole beans, which are going to be climbing up into the corn stalks. And again, that's part of the way it works. Usually with the sweet corn crop, then as you harvest that, you're going to be losing a portion of the pole bean crop. I mean, just walking down the rows, you're going to be trampling the pole beans. And so, yes, that can be a challenge. One way around that, of course, is to plant a longer season corn and a shorter season bean crop so that you can walk down the rows initially and harvest the bean crop, and then walk down the rows and harvest the corn crop. But again, this can be a bit of a challenge because there's really not that much difference in ripening time between typical sweet corn and typical pole beans. And pole beans are a longer season crop than bush type green beans. And so, yeah, I would have to think about that, Dwight, as far as coming up with a good plan for a companion planting of beans and corn. Now, if you were growing the traditional two sisters, which is dried corn and dried beans, that's pretty straightforward. You just plant the crops and then you can harvest them together later in the fall when both the corn crop is dry and the bean crop is dry. Or if the bean crop dries down earlier, then you just walk in amongst the corn and harvest the dry beans.
That was a really good question.
See, do we have any additional questions?
I don't believe so.
Okay, very good. Well, Hannah, it's a pleasure to be back with you again. I'm glad that you'll be moderating here moving ahead.
And, sorry that I was late. Will never happen again. I'm never late.
No problem. No problem at all. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and close down the meeting. Again, one more plea for your help with the evaluations, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Good night.